Welcome to Talent Matters, the talent management podcast from PSI. We are the world's leading talent experts, working with clients across the globe to screen, select, develop and engage, delivering over 30 million assessments every year. The world of work is changing at an increasingly rapid pace, and we want to share our leading insight to discuss the main challenges organisations are facing in 2021. In our first series, we will focus on assessment and selection in the reshaped world of work, inviting our guests to talk about their real-world talent challenges and how they have overcome them. Our aim is always to focus on practical takeaways for you. So thank you for listening. Okay, welcome to today's episode where I'm really pleased to introduce Hannah Quinn from Pareto Law. And today we're going to be talking about the candidate journey and experience from a different perspective. So thanks for joining me today, Hannah. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really excited. I'm currently a client success manager. So I kind of deal with finding these successful candidates that come through our virtual assessment day jobs within the business to business sales sector. And I've been at Pareto Law for 5 months. I'm really enjoying it. I graduated in November, so I went straight into it after that.
Fantastic, thank you. And that's why we've invited you today as a recent graduate. Really thought it would be a great discussion to hear about your experience of applying for jobs in the last kind of 12 months. And obviously with so many people applying for jobs, so much use of technology, really interested to hear your perspective on what this experience is like from a candidate point of view, and to share with our listeners some of those things that they might want to consider bearing in mind when designing selection processes. So I thought we'll start with the positive side of things, and wondered if you could tell us a little bit about some of the good experiences you've had where you've really felt valued as a candidate.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think I felt most valued when the process was quite quick. So scheduling particularly, I really enjoyed the processes where I simply sent off my CV and immediately received a link to a situational judgment test to complete within 24 to 48 hours. I also really enjoyed processes that involved kind of relevant situational judgment tests and the occasional game. Also, I felt valued when companies would respond relatively quickly, say 3 to 5 days after submitting a application or CV. And I also preferred it when I'd receive an email directly after completing an online test, which kind of contained my results. Sometimes they'd even contain, certain statistics showing how I compared to other candidates, which I found really insightful. So yeah, those were the highlights, I think, of the processes.
So sort of everything that's sort of personalised and made it more meaningful, I guess, for you, made it worthwhile investment of your time. I guess you're applying for so many jobs at that point as well that you just want to know, how quickly can that be actually turned into an offer, that you're being taken seriously, and that you're going to get something out of your investment of time into that as well. So I think that's really, really helpful. And of course, I suppose we should look at the not so good stuff. So, when does a recruitment process really put you off a company because of your experience as a candidate?
Like we just mentioned, processes that are just super slow. So I'm even getting emails back now from November when I'd send off an application. And I think that's just really poor, to be honest. Also, assessments that just aren't relevant. So I'd receive gamified tests that maybe didn't reflect the day-to-day responsibilities of the specific role I was applying for, or tests that contain a math section about algebra when I was applying for strictly consultative roles that didn't really require a high level of math skills. So yeah, that was quite difficult. And a few of the kind of gamified tests were quite intense as well and required probably 2 to 3 hours to complete fully from start to finish. I just don't really think this is appropriate for kind of a first stage interview, especially if you don't have that experience behind you and you're being asked about, specific situations using a lot of jargon that I just didn't feel prepared to answer. And yeah, sometimes I'd spend a lot of time completing that test and then maybe not even receive a response. That just didn't feel good. Other responses would be like very generic, didn't even include my name, kind of just, you've been unsuccessful, thanks for the application. So yeah, maybe lacking a certain sense of empathy, especially at the time.
If this discussion is making you think about how you engage your candidates through your recruitment processes, you might be interested to hear more about Hire. Our modular solution enables you to add as much or as little technology as possible to your recruitment process. Engage your candidates from the outset by providing company and role information, letting them know what life is really like working for you, using your own branding, imagery, and videos. With 6 assessment modules to choose from, you can go beyond ability as a screening tool, getting insights into values and culture match, personality and work style, language fluency, and situational judgment. You can use engagement screens to explain the application and assessment processes, with clear timelines and links to practice online tests, as well as setting up automated candidate feedback for your volume recruitment campaigns, ensuring that even when you have greater candidate numbers, that applicants still get something back from you to either help with their onboarding or future job applications. Whether you're managing 20 or 20,000 candidate applications, Hire gives your candidates a great experience and gives you the data you need to quickly and effectively make hiring decisions. Head over to psionline.com/talent to find out more. Personalising someone's name to at least, showcase that you've seen who they are as a person is a small touch, but it really goes a long way to demonstrate that someone's being taken seriously rather than a generic response, because I guess it makes you feel, doesn't it? Like, am I really being taken seriously? Am I really being considered for this role, or not? Or am I just a number on a page? So I think there's so many ways that organisations can balance a few personal touches to demonstrate that they are taking people seriously. And we've mentioned a couple of times then around gamified assessments, and I wanted to kind of pick up on that point of when it's really disengaging for assessments not to be perceived as relevant, and talk a little bit about that. And that is a theme that we've heard from others anecdotally, that gamified assessments, they look good and they can at face value feel quite engaging and quite fun, and that absolutely has its merits, but actually sometimes candidates don't feel like they're being taken that seriously. I've even heard people sometimes say that they feel patronised by that kind of assessment, and not really being truly assessed for the core requirements of the role. Now, I know that you did your dissertation on this topic, so definitely probably more experience than me talking about this, and would be really keen to hear your perspectives and any of the highlights that you found through your research.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said about them being engaging, I think some of them are super engaging, and they have the bright colours, the moving parts, they have everything that can definitely engage you. And I find them really interesting. Like you said, quite controversial because they're quite new. Not a lot of companies are using them at the moment. They were said to kind of take off a couple of years ago, and now I think they've kind of dimmed down a little bit. I think they definitely have the potential to transform the mundane task of job applications into something more fun and challenging. However, the kind of findings from my dissertation that kind of shocked me outlined that candidates felt they weren't really relevant to the specific role they applied to. And they kind of said either a waste of time, or maybe they would have preferred to do a relevant traditional situational judgment test that related specifically to the traits and responsibilities required for that job. I also found that candidates thought they would prefer a gamified assessment on face value, like, oh, you're going to be completing a gamified assessment. They were like, wow, like well up for it. But then upon completion, kind of changed their mind and said, it was fun, but maybe for the kind of job I'm applying for, it either wasn't relevant or it wasn't being taken seriously, especially for jobs with, higher salaries, more senior roles. They would prefer a formal interview process.
Yeah, and you're right. I need to think about what stage that comes in the process as well. And you mentioned earlier on, it's probably not appropriate for a first stage assessment as like a sift, but maybe it's more relevant further down the line when you've sort of been assessed properly or been taken seriously from the outset. But actually, even the most innovative companies are really relying on more what we would consider traditional assessment or more tried and tested assessment approaches. And actually that there's a level of comfort with that from candidates as well, to make sure that the job is being done right and you're being taken seriously as a proper candidate. So it was really interesting to hear, and great to hear that the research is backing up some of that anecdotal feedback as well. So thank you for sharing that. What I'd love to hear then, I suppose, on a practical note then, is what your 3 top tips for recruiters would be, those that are designing selection processes at the moment. Obviously, the graduate market is somewhat overcrowded, and I suspect that trend will continue over the next couple of years. So yeah, it'd be great to hear your top tips, really.
Great. I think my first top tip, I've mentioned it a couple of times now, but just make sure to make the process meaningful by making sure that the tests, situational judgment tests, the gamified tests, or the interviews are reflecting the core competencies or personality traits needed to excel in the role. I think that would be my main tip. I think that's really important, so that neither the candidate or the employer is feeling that it's a waste of time. It's an investment to go through that interview process. So it's important on both sides to feel like it's reflecting what they need to be an asset to the organization and the role. That would be my first tip. Second tip, probably just take the time to send meaningful responses to candidates. Whether they're successful or unsuccessful, it shouldn't matter. Word of mouth is such a powerful thing. And if a company has a difficult or unnecessary process where you don't feel you're being treated fairly, candidates will probably speak about it to each other. It goes around, what are you applying for? What roles have you been doing? So yeah, I would say just have a bit of empathy and remember the time where you were applying for jobs and what you would have liked to receive from companies. And third tip, use technology in a sensible way. It's fine having an engaging gamified assessment, but don't use kind of the fun components just for the sake of the graduate experience. If candidates are perceiving a gamified test as unprofessional or unnecessary, they'll probably equate that to their application not being taken seriously. And it will probably negatively impact their perception of the organization and the role. It might even put them off. As a bonus point, maybe make the interview process as quick as possible. It is very stressful to graduate from university and start applying for multiple jobs, especially when you're waiting to hear back from companies. That is the majority of it. It's the waiting around for a response that is the most stressful part. But yeah, those would be my top tips.
Oh, so helpful. All of those tips, about using technology for the right reasons, and balancing the need to come across and engage candidates, but make sure that your assessment is actually doing what it's set out to do, that it's predictive of job performance, that you are actually testing the core competencies required of the role. All of those points are so valid, and very much echo some of what we talked to Katrina Collier about in one of our earlier podcasts. So if our listeners haven't listened to that, would strongly encourage going back to episode 1 of the Talent Matters podcast, because it's great to hear it from a recruiter and a candidate perspective, some really similar themes. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you so much for your time today. It's really insightful to hear your perspectives, so thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and observations.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
If you would like to hear more about the solutions discussed in today's podcast, or you would like to join a future podcast discussion, please visit psionline.com/talent. Thank you for listening.